Hi, I'm Jen. I work on the planning team at Sewing Street behind the scenes. I have 20 years background in sewing, dressmaking and pattern cutting, and I'm here today to teach you the basics of beginner dressmaking. So today I'm going to be going through the basic tools and supplies that you will need to start dressmaking. The first thing being a sewing machine. So your sewing machine might vary at home, but we are using the Elna 240 today, and it's got some fantastic features, but it is a beginner entry-level sewing machine, so it's absolutely ideal if you haven't had a sewing machine before or you are looking for a machine just for your dressmaking. So this is the sewing machine we will be using for this series. It is an Elna 240, and it has a fantastic range of features, even though it is a beginner entry level machine. So we have our stitch length here, our stitch dial. There are tons of different stitches on this machine, but I don't want you to overthink it. We want to be focusing on just a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch. So as long as your machine has those features, you'll be able to use it for this series in the beginner dressmaking. We also have your needle plate with measurements on there. This one has both centimeters and inches, which is really handy for lining up your seam allowances. We also have a stitch width dial, a reverse pedal, and your flywheel here, which you can pull out if you need to wind your bobbin, and it goes back in. This is what will turn the needle. You always want to be turning this towards you. If I can tell you one tip to look after your machine, turn this towards you. This machine also has an extension table, so you pull this section out, and this is ideal if you're working on sleeves or narrow trouser legs. This machine has a front-loading bobbin, and all the parts in here are metal. This just means this machine is going to last you a really long time, and it will take you through from your beginner dressmaking all the way through to more advanced dressmaking. I'm going to go through today some key tools that you need to start dressmaking that are absolutely beginner-friendly but essential to your dressmaking journey. So the first thing I recommend is a pair of fabric shears. These are ideal for cutting your fabric, and you should keep them for fabric cutting only. You can get them in a variety of lengths, but honestly anything from minimum kind of 5-6 inch blade up until tailoring shears will work fine, but as long as you keep them just for your fabric. Then some tailor's chalk. We will need to mark our fabrics at various points during the course of dressmaking, whether that be for darts, for notches, or for pivot points. So it's really handy to have something like chalk that is removable that you can mark your fabric with. You will need some threads for sewing. A value pack like this is fantastic because you can start with lots of different colours of fabric and you can match it to your project. But you might find that you just want a spool of black or white thread to get you started. This pack is also fantastic because it includes a tape measure, which is the next thing on our list. So the next thing is our special Sewing Street tape measure. This also features a magnet on the back, which is perfect if you lose your pins. A tape measure is ideal because you need it for measuring yourself, which we will go through later on in the series, but also it's handy to keep one on side just in case you need to measure a pattern piece or if you need to check your seam allowance. It's always worth having one handy. And then the next thing I'll suggest is a seam ripper or an unpicker. You might hear them go by many different names, but they are absolutely vital. You will need one, you will make mistakes, and mistakes are okay. It's good to make mistakes, this is how you learn, and keep at least one, I would say, a seam ripper handy. You might also find you get one with your sewing machine, but one like this, which has a light included, is fantastic. Really easy on the eyes if you've got a light included. Then we have our sewing pins. Now I'd recommend looking for dressmaking pins. I particularly enjoy things like glass-headed pins because you can see them easier on your fabric and they're easier to take in and out of the fabric as well. And then if you lose one, you can use the magnet on the back of this tape measure to find them. Really handy for not only joining up seams, but sometimes you also need them to mark certain parts on your pattern before you introduce your chalk to the back of your fabric. Last but not least, a handy pair of snips. I always keep multiple pairs of scissors around, but these are great for cutting your threads or for just trimming little sections, maybe even for marking your darts or notches as well. That's really all you need to start. There are plenty of other things you could use. You obviously have your sewing machine, but you could get an overlocker. Also really recommend you have yourself an iron. This is a travel iron. You can use any size iron, but it will be handy for pressing your seams. And there are other products that as we go on I can recommend that aren't essential but will potentially make your life easier while you're dressmaking. So I'm going to run through a few different fabrics that you will need for this dressmaking series. Not necessarily the exact ones that I've got here, but the fabrics that you want to think about for your first garment. So we're going to start off with some calico. Calico is ideal because it is a perfect lightweight fabric that you can use for making toiles or test mock-up garments, but it's also great for practicing your stitches. It's inexpensive and usually you get quite a nice wide width on it as well. You can see there's a slight texture to it. You'll see a slight grain. This is a natural kind of fabric that's not been dyed or processed. But it is absolutely fantastic, something you should always have in your collection of fabrics. You will always need something like calico. And when we talk about making your first garment, and we will make a toile, we will be making it in calico. So I'd recommend getting yourself a couple of meters or a small bolt if you're able to, because it's always handy to have on hand. This one in particular from our website, I'll just open it up. You can see that this is quite a wide width fabric. I think it's approximately 150 centimeters wide, and you will find I talk a lot in centimeters during this series because as a UK dressmaker, the vast majority of things are in centimeters. 150 meters wide is pretty much a standard dressmaking fabric width, but this is 2 meters worth. You could get loads out of this. When you are making a mock-up or a toile, you don't necessarily have to do all of the different details. It's particularly focused on getting the shaping correct, getting the lengths correct. So you might not need quite as much in calico as you would need in your final fabric. Next, we're going to move on to a plain cotton. So this is a Rose and Hubble cotton, just in lilac, and it goes to show that if you're already perhaps a quilter, you might have some fabric like this in your stash already. But these fabrics are also ideal for dressmaking. They are lightweight, they don't stretch, they have no print, so you're not worrying about pattern matching, and also they look pretty much the same on the reverse as they do on the front. These ones are a slightly narrower width at about 112 centimeters. So do bear this in mind when we are looking at the fabrics requirements on our patterns, because you may need to order more fabric to allow for this, but this is a fantastic stable fabric to sew with. Now, you might want to be trying something a bit more fun and exciting for your first project, but maybe consider a non-directional print in something like a cotton poplin. So this is fantastic for dressmaking. I love working with cotton poplin. It is slightly more lightweight than the craft cotton that we used previously. Although this one, I believe, also is a narrower width. So this is about 110, 112 centimeters wide. Again, you need to pay attention to that when you are looking for fabrics and looking at your fabric requirements, but it is a gorgeous, stable fabric. It's not going to shift about, but it has this really lovely finish to it. So it will look fantastic in a lot of woven dressmaking projects. Another fabric you'll see commonly recommended is viscose. Viscose is often commonly blended with other fibres to create various different types of fabrics. This one is a linen viscose blend, and it has a nice slub texture to it. So a slub texture means that there's a little bit of some like raises and divots on this fabric. You can see where it has been woven, and you can also feel it. But this one is still a fantastic beginner fabric if you're feeling a little bit adventurous, because it's still very stable. See, there's no stretch in there. It's a woven fabric, and it is still a relatively lightweight one as well. It's not going to be slipping about all over the place. So I would recommend something like a viscose linen slub or just a viscose plain linen. It would also work very well for a beginner project. As we're talking about viscose, we might come across things like viscose challis, which I think is how it's pronounced. Now this one I would still say it could work well for a beginner, but maybe if you're a bit more confident, you've already done a lot of sewing, whether that's bag making or quilting, then you might be okay with working with a fabric like this. But the drape is a lot softer. It looks beautiful, and it's actually a really inexpensive fabric, but it will be slightly harder to work with because it might slip. And it means it's going to be fantastic for draping for certain projects like dresses, but it might not be the most stable fabric to use for your first garment. Now we're going to come on to some of my favorite fabrics to work with when it comes to dressmaking. We have denim in 2 different weights. So the denim we have on our website comes in 4 ounce, which is this one here. It feels like a chambray, which is a lighter weight denim. And you can see there that it's really kind of soft. It's got a great handle, and it also, it won't fray too much. It'll only fray as you start to cut more into it and you handle the fabric more, but it is a really stable fabric to work with, and this one is quite lightweight, and they come in lots of different colours. But then we also go up various weights in fabric. You might see 7.5 ounces. This one's an 8 ounce denim. Now, I absolutely love working with denim. Actually, using the heavier weight fabric like an 8 ounce might work really well for your first project because it's got a lot of structure in there. It's not going to move around too much. The only time you might get into a bit of difficulty is if you're working with lots of layers of fabric. So for example, I was making a denim jacket recently, and it involved about 12 different layers of denim, and sewing through that on some machines can be really tricky. Thankfully, the 240 that we will be using is fantastic for handling thicker fabrics. We will talk through the different patterns I've got on show today and which fabrics might be best for each of those. I'm just going to talk through some of the basic structure of fabrics. So you will see that along the edge of most fabrics, there is a straight edge which is slightly thicker, and there's a somewhat texture to it. If I just show you an example on another fabric, you can also see kind of prick marks. This is where it's been attached to the loom, I believe, but this is called your selvage. And it's important to identify your selvage because you need to know where your grain line of your fabric is. Now, if you're already an experienced sewer and perhaps you quilt or you make bags and things like that, you should already have some awareness about your grain line and a warp and weft. But if you don't, if you're brand new to this, then once you've identified your selvage, this is how the fabric would be hung up on a loom. So you've got your top to bottom runs along the selvage. Now, we have a warp and a weft. So for the easiest way to figure that out is your warp threads run parallel to your selvage edge. Now, the warp threads are the strongest threads in your fabric. So that is why a lot of our pattern pieces will have a grain line, and you want to be cutting those pieces along the grain line. So that is following your warp threads or in line parallel to your selvage edge. Now, left to right are your weft threads. So the easy way to remember it is warp is your up and down, but weft is right to weft. That's how we were taught at school and taught at university, and it's just forever stuck in my brain. We also have the diagonal across the fabric. So this is called the bias, and the bias stretches, which is a really handy thing when you're working with a fabric that is a non-stretch woven fabric. If you pull it along the weft threads or the warp threads, it's not stretching, it's not going anywhere, but if you want to get some stretch in there, you can cut along the bias. It will come up in various patterns when you have to cut part of your piece along the bias. Not every piece is going to be a straight rectangle. And what's fantastic about dressmaking is that you are taking flat pieces of fabric, flat pieces of paper, and turning them into something that can go around a curved body. And you are making something that fits you. You are not trying to fit yourself into the clothes. You are making something custom, and I think that's amazing. Alongside the fabrics you might consider, you will also likely need some interfacing. So this is a lightweight interfacing that's iron-on. It's really handy to have some interfacing in your stash, just in case, because for things like collars, for cuffs, even for buttonholes and pockets, you might find that you need a small piece of interfacing just to help stabilize your fabric, especially if you're working with something very thin. I would say it's probably not ideal for something that is sheer, but it's definitely worth using on opaque fabrics. We will get onto the differences of maybe opaque and sort of sheer fabrics later on, but generally we will be focusing on quite opaque fabrics, and interfacing is ideal. Now, it's time to talk about fabrics you absolutely shouldn't be using for your first dressmaking project. You do not want to be sewing with these to sew your first garment. They are difficult to handle. They require a slightly different skill set, and they are really just suited to particular projects. It's not that you should never use these for dressmaking. You just need to have a little bit of practice under your belt before you try and take on some of these. So the first one I would say is organza. Now, this can often be used in craft, but as you'll see, it stretches from all different angles, not even just the bias, but left to right. It's slippy, it falls all over the place, and it will probably just slip out from underneath you. So while it's really fun and would be great for costumes, or even like if you didn't have a rainbow version, you just had like a plain cream version, might be nice as an overlay on a skirt. Build yourself up a little bit before you're getting ready to use something like organza. The same would be said for chiffon. You also will see, as it's totally sheer, any sewing, you will absolutely see it through both sides. So you have to come up with some new techniques, or use the techniques that I will hopefully go through in the course of these videos, and we can figure out how we would use these types of fabrics. The next fabric I'll say is jersey. So this is a stretch fabric, and jersey can come in either a 2-way or a 4-way stretch. This one, I believe, is a 4-way stretch. Now, it's a beautiful fabric, and I definitely think it would be something that a confident, more advanced beginner would be able to use. But again, there are different techniques involved in using jersey, and you'd be looking for different dressmaking patterns. So the dressmaking patterns we will be looking at across this series will all be based on woven fabrics. So at the moment, we won't be looking at any jersey. But if you keep subscribing and liking these videos, perhaps we can create another series where we start to look at beginners using jersey fabrics. The next one would be a lovely micro satin. This fabric is gorgeous. It has a really nice handle and it drapes beautifully. But if you're using it for your first project, you will find it's going to slip all over the place. It's going to be difficult to cut out, and you will just find it a little bit of a nightmare. And we don't want to be putting yourself off on your very first project. So keep away from the slinky fabrics for now. But again, there's something that you could work on as you start upskilling yourself. They're not a fabric you should never touch. They are gorgeous and will work for some projects absolutely beautifully, but they do require some patience and some skill to be able to use them effectively. Now, the last one I would say is, this one is a faux fur, but it would be very similar to like a boucle wool fabric. They are very thick, and as you can see, it sheds everywhere. So you have the backing layer, and then also this textured layer. There is a lot of different things we'd need to do first to be able to sew with this effectively if you were wanting to make an entire garment. And also if you're using a fabric like this, it's likely to be some sort of jacket that will require a lining, and things like that are just better saved for when you're feeling a little bit more of an advanced dressmaker. Now we're going to discuss a few different sewing patterns. There is a fantastic range of patterns out there nowadays. You used to find just a few different companies, so you'd have like Simplicity and McCall's, or the Big Four, as people will call them, but now there are lots of indie designers and bigger companies up and coming which have fantastic ranges of patterns. So we're particularly looking at beginner or confident beginner patterns today, but actually it's quite challenging to find a lot of them out there. And how I started was following tutorials. So YouTube was definitely in its infancy when I first started to learn how to sew, but I would Google all these different types of sewing tutorials, figure out how to cut up my clothes, and work from that. So the fact that we have this fantastic range of pattern designers out there nowadays is really brilliant if you are looking to start sewing and dressmaking. So I'm going to start off with the Simplicity pattern. Now, this is a pattern company that has been around for absolute decades, and they are known for their great quality and the huge variety of patterns that they do. So a dress like this would probably be considered at the upper end of a confident beginner, or even looking into intermediate, depending on which style you were looking at making. So the great thing about a lot of patterns is they have alternate views, and that's really great for learning about the different ways that you can sew up a garment. And you might find that it be an intermediate pattern, but one of the options is far simpler than the rest. So it's a great way to get you started. So for this pattern, you have A, B, C, and D, and they have a photo of C as well. And then on the back, this is your key information that you need to see. So there are always going to be pieces of information that you can see before you buy the pattern, and you would be able to access all of this information on the back as well as the different images of the different views. So this pattern is a Mrs. pullover dress in 3 lengths with sleeve variations. So it's really got a lot of variety with this pattern. It has the body measurements suggestions, and what I would really recommend is you are looking at your measurements. You're not looking at UK or US sizing in terms of commercial clothing. You need to be thinking about your body measurements. You will be making products that do not align with your size that you might buy in a store. For example, I made something that was a size 18 the other day, whereas I wear a size 12 to 14 in a lot of clothing stores. So on this pattern, we have our fabric suggestions, which is really handy as well. It helps you to match up the fabric with the pattern. You also have some suggestions about if you are buying fabric with a print or a stripe or a check, about the fact that you might need extra fabric. It also suggests your notions. So for this one, you need thread, bias tape, elastic, even a pom-pom fringe on some of them. And this is really important to check because it's handy to have all of your supplies before you start. Now, this one has the sizes. So this goes from a UK 4 to a UK 20, which is a great size range. You will find a lot of patterns. This might be their standard core size range, but you are seeing more and more pattern companies now who will design 2 different size ranges for patterns. You'll have a smaller range and a larger range. And it's really important you start maybe as a guide with your clothing size, but you then look at the inch or centimeter measurements to choose your actual size. So this has the fabric requirements on here for each of the different views. So for example, if you were making option A and you were making a size 12, for a 60-inch wide fabric, which is about 150 centimeters, you are looking at 3 5/8 of a meter. So I would definitely round that up and get 4 meters, but you would probably easily get it out of 3.5. They tend to round up on most patterns. And then you also have the finished garment measurements, which is really helpful because some garments are designed to be far more oversized than others, and some are designed to have a lot of fitting and shaping involved. So this one definitely has some ease, which is the movement, like it's the extra fabric that allows for movement in your clothing. But ease could also be referencing a pattern that's perhaps a little bit oversized. So this definitely you're looking at more of a confident beginner, but it is really helpful to go through. I'll quickly show you the inside because this one is slightly different to our other patterns, but you get an instructions booklet, which we can go through in more depth when we choose which pattern we're going to go for. But generally most patterns will have a key to show you your different symbols. They will have things like a note of all of the different pattern pieces, and they should also have layout guides for how to place your pattern pieces onto your fabric, and then there's the instructions. For simplicity patterns, you'll often find them on this kind of very thin pattern paper, which is slightly translucent, but it will have all of the sizes printed on it. So you'll see a range of different sizes, and that would be the pattern piece that you would cut around depending on the size you are cutting. There is far more detail I can go into with patterns, but let me do an overview of all the ones we have here today. And then in one of the future videos, we will go into more depth in terms of looking at notches, pivot points, darts, and things like that. And also how you can potentially adapt your own pattern to make it suit you a little bit more. The next pattern we're going to look at is an Emporia pattern, and it's the Penelope dress. This is in sizes 6 to 30, which is a fantastic size range. And on the back of the pattern, you will see all of the different sizes. This is the clothing size or the size that they indicate in the pattern, and then that will link to the finished measurements. So you can get an idea of how loose fitting or how snug fitting a garment might be. Now, this pattern also contains some useful information. For example, the pattern doesn't actually contain a skirt piece. You'll be using that with rectangles. And also some differences between the sizing. So sizes 6 to 24 will have a certain amount of fabric needed. So this one's 4 meters. And then sizes 26 to 30 actually need 4.5 meters. Emporia make it very simple for you to know what fabric to get, and they also give you different suggestions on how to work with this pattern for your requirements. I would also recommend going onto the websites of your pattern designers and just looking to see if they have any sew-alongs or tips and hacks for their sewing patterns, because that can be really helpful to have alongside your first pattern. This is a gorgeous dress that you can also have with a shorter version of the skirt with no frill. But there are plenty of ways you can adapt patterns like this to suit yourself a little bit more. The next pattern we will have a look at is the Merchant & Mills factory dress. I love Merchant & Mills. I used to live very close to their factory store, and everything about Merchant & Mills fits this same brand identity. So you will see a very kind of clean cut image. Clean cut image, and they're also quite industrial. So this pattern, the factory dress, actually is a dress or a top. So it's really handy to know that you could actually make 2 different garments on here. So this comes in UK sizes 8 to 18, which is a slightly smaller size range than we've seen in some of the other patterns, but they actually also do this pattern in a larger size range as well. The reason they do 2 different ones is often to allow for a bust adjustment. Smaller size patterns tend to be drafted based on a B cup or a C cup, whereas the larger size range tends to be based more on sometimes a C, but often a D cup or an E cup. And this is really handy because it saves you from having to do bust adjustments if you are using some of the larger sizes. Now, this one actually says on here, skill level intermediate. But if you were to go on their website, they suggest this as a fantastic beginner pattern. And one of the first projects I ever did at university where we were following a more commercial pattern was to work on a shirt with a collar and a button stand. This taught us so many different techniques. So having a project with some kind of shirt collar, with lots of types of seams and maybe some shaping is actually a fantastic project to start with because it will teach you lots of different skills. Again, similar information on the back. You've got your suitable fabrics, you've got your notions, you've got your fabric requirements, finish measurements, and a size chart. So it's really handy to have all of that information before you even open the pattern. And just to quickly show you some of the differences between some say more indie patterns than bigger companies like Simplicity, is you will see it on a different type of paper. So this is almost like on your standard printer paper, but in a large scale format. It's often on A0 paper or a continual large scale format printed paper. And again, you will see the different sizes and different notes added onto the pattern. You might see notches are done in a slightly different way, but they will still have the sizes written on the pattern, and each pattern piece will be noted. And this one also comes with a very handy booklet. Everything on this front page is exactly the same as what's on outside of the pattern, but it will also show you a step-by-step guide on how to create this pattern. I think this one would be a really good beginner's pattern if you are looking for something that has a little bit of a challenge to it, but is still relatively simple. Now, the next pattern I'm going to go over is one we have available on Sewing Street, but we have it in 2 different forms. So we have it in a printed copy, which is similar to the Merchant & Mills pattern, where you get your pattern pieces all printed out on a large format paper. You still get all of the sizes on here, and it comes with a booklet as well. So let's have a quick flick through. It's a really nice booklet which tells you exactly how to make the pattern and shows you 3 different views. This pattern has the same measurements on the outside as you would expect. Similar to our other patterns, it has the body measurements guide as well as the finished garment measurements. both of which are important to look at. Again, this pattern company do a smaller size range and a larger size range, and they do base things on different bust sizes. So the notes at the bottom here, the pattern is initially drafted from a base size UK 10 with an average height of 5'7". This pattern is drafted to a dressmaker's B cup. That means there is a 2-inch difference or 5 centimeters between the high bust and the full bust. So you will see in our upcoming videos that we will talk about how to do your measurements, as it is vital to know what your body measurements are and what your cup sizes are based on sewing patterns and dressmaking, because it might not be the same as what you think. Now, NH Patterns is a fantastic pattern company, but they also have digital downloads. This is one of the first dressmaking companies where we've had digital downloads available on our website. And when you see the files, once you've downloaded it, they come in a few different forms, and it might be a little confusing when you first start to have a look at this. But with this pattern in particular, you will download a series of files which will include the booklet, which is about how you can make the pattern. And I've just printed this with 2 pages to each A4, because as you'll see, it takes up a lot of paper. But it is really handy if you want to be able to buy a pattern and start sewing it straight away. Digital downloads are the way to go. And then you have a few options when it comes to the actual pattern. So this is the A4 pattern where you print out every single sheet, and it gives you a guide on how to tape it all together to create your pattern pieces. Your other option is there will be an A0 file, which is something you would get sent to a copy shop, and they will print the pattern out for you. You'll often find with these patterns as well that they have a layered PDF, which means you can select which sizes you want to print. So perhaps you only want to print your size, you don't want to have to worry about different size guides on here. You can just select your own size, which is really helpful. And this guide is definitely your key. You need to keep this safe. And what's also great on some of these patterns is they will just say which pages you might need to print for different options within your pattern. When it comes to picking your first pattern, after we've had a look at these different ones, what I really recommend is to have a look at what you already own, what clothes you really like to wear. Don't think so much about trends, but think about something you might find comfortable. So if you really love to wear like shift dresses, for example, or if you love a nice blouse with perhaps like a looser fit, this is ideal. But I would also recommend looking for patterns which perhaps don't have too much shaping. Some darts is absolutely fine, and you will be able to conquer those as a beginner, no problem. But perhaps if you were looking at, for example, this dress by Simplicity, you're not going to be wanting to do an option which has loads and loads of detail. Some of these are far simpler than others. For example, D is probably one of your simpler views, but you will learn things like how to do a neckline and do a sleeve. But this view might even be easier because it's a sleeveless variety. Each pattern is going to have its own challenges, so it's just important really to focus on something that says advanced or confident beginner. Advanced beginner and confident beginner can be very similar, or even something that says easy on the pattern, but pick something that you will want to wear, and then you're going to be matching your fabric to go with it. So that's a little bit of homework for your next video, is to try and choose a pattern that's going to work well for you and work well in your wardrobe and work well for your body type, because again, we are making the clothes to suit us. We are not trying to fit ourselves into clothes that just aren't right for all of our different body types. You might have like fluctuating weight, for example, or you might just really struggle to fit into a standard size that you can find in clothes shops. So I'd really recommend finding something that has like a bit less shaping, or something that allows for a looser fit, because that will just be absolutely ideal for your first garment. One, for the ease of sewing, but two, it's something you're going to really love and hopefully wear for a long time. If you're struggling to choose your first pattern, and perhaps these ones haven't excited you, which is absolutely fine, perhaps maybe have a think about your top 3, and you can pop them in the comments, and either the other viewers or myself can give you some suggestions and point you in the right direction as which might be the perfect first pattern for you. I think for this series we will probably be looking at either a shift dress or a blouse, because I think they'll be some of the most versatile pieces and can work for lots of different people. I also think depending on your fabric choice, they will have really different results, which I think is another beautiful thing about dressmaking. You've been watching our beginner dressmaking series. This has been part 1, but if you want to like and subscribe, then you will see all of our upcoming content and hopefully learn some fantastic new tools and be able to sew your first garment. Thank you.